for one of our journals that focus on cell biology and biochemistry. So BCB, biochemistry and cell biology. We do a lot of work with CSMB, including having several awards for content and articles published in a journal from CSMB members. So feel free to check that out on our website. And with me today is the amazing Danie. Danie, do you want to say a couple words?
Yes, hi, thank you. Um, I'm Danie Descoteaux. I'm the executive publisher of molecular biology journals at Elsevier. Um, I thought I would just introduce myself briefly and then I can kick us off. But I do want to say thank you so much for having me for CSMB. It was really great to attend your conference in May this year, to meet Calvin, to meet several folks in attendance. I also think, it's really unusual. So I'm at Elsevier. Calvin is Canadian Science Publishing. It's quite unusual for folks at different publishers to collaborate on something like this together, but I think this is a really excellent topic on which to do so because as a whole, the research publishing industry is really trying to work together on the opportunities and the challenges that AI poses. So this is kind of a nice little emblematic thing I think to be doing, and I'm looking forward to getting started. Um, I'm not in Canada, I should say that. I'm based outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And my work involves working with a number of society partners, including the ASBMB, Cell Stress Society International, and the Korean Society of Molecular and Cellular Biology. And I also oversee a number of our own publications, like the Journal of Molecular Biology. All right, if I can kick us off then on Gen AI. Uh, Perfect. And if you can go, yep, exactly. Thank you. I wanted to start with some definitions, right? So that we're on the same page. What is Gen AI? Broadly, it's a generative AI refers to learning algorithms that can make predictions and that can generate new content if you give it prompts, feed it new input. And there's a difference between traditional AI that analyzes data and tells you what it sees, and Gen AI that takes that data and creates something new. The technology behind Gen AI tools like ChatGPT and Bing are called large language models. LLMs have existed for decades, but it was November 2022, just 3 years ago, that ChatGPT hit the scene and really popularized the technology and made it accessible to a much larger audience of users. And Calvin will be talking about exactly how that uptick in usage has happened over the last 3 years. I also want to say that LLMs predict the likelihood of a word given the previous words in a text and then generates new text that's often indistinguishable from human text. It can sound very authoritative, but the models, as you likely know, can generate output that's incorrect, incomplete, or biased, and that's the reason it's essential to apply human oversight and control to the use of this technology. Can you do the next slide? So a closer look at some of the key risks of Gen AI related specifically to its use in scientific scholarly writing and publishing. I've grouped them here into a couple of key themes. One of the most pressing concerns is that Gen AI tools can generate incorrect or completely made up information. This is also incorrectly often referred to as hallucinations. They can include citing non-existing references or making up authors for a paper or suggesting non-existing reviewers. And this can contribute to the spread of misinformation, which is a growing issue. There's also concerns around ethical misbehavior and bias. So one of the problems with LLMs is that they often lack transparency. How is a model trained? It may be based on biased training data. It may potentially infringe ethical standards, and that can result in plagiarism, a lack of proper attribution, and violations of confidentiality or data privacy rights. And there's also concerns about environmental impacts. AI models consume a ton of energy. So companies are looking at ways of diminishing the carbon footprint of AI, for instance, by using foundational models and fine tuning them instead of building new models from scratch. But it's obviously an inherent issue. Next slide. And there's also some smaller risks associated with the use of Gen AI. Um, the data on which the model is based may be outdated, and then it's not going to be drawing any information from current news or insights. They can also lead to a homogenization of content across the board because it will optimize for efficiency, making the content it creates increasingly repetitive and uniform. I just saw that the word of the year is apparently slop, so that's where that comes in. And a further limitation to mention here is that recent consumer-focused tools such as ChatGPT are not trained with scientific data. But of course, there's a lot of domain-specific models that are designed specifically for researchers, which I think we'll be seeing more and more of. You do the next one. So how have we, Elsevier, and the scholarly communication community been responding to the rise of Gen AI? I would say that we're collectively excited about the opportunities the technology brings. We'll talk about that a bit, but we also see a real need and urgency for establishing a framework on how to use it responsibly. So many publishers and STM organizations introduced their own guidelines and policies in 2023, with transparency being the key guiding principle. There's also cross-publisher collaborations. The STM Integrity Hub is one thing to look at. And the aim is to create more uniform and understandable guidelines for our communities. But there are publishers that don't allow the use of Gen AI under any condition. So that is important to know, and a good reason to always check the guide for authors of any journal that you are looking at. In general, reading the guide for authors is something that publishers would encourage you to do. But most publishers do allow Gen AI for improving language, for example. There's other, perfectly valid use cases for Gen AI in a research paper. And that's something that we'll also touch on. But the key issue to know is that proper disclosure is the guide star through any publisher that's going to allow Gen AI. We do expect policies to evolve in the coming months and years in response to developments in the technology, feedback from the scientific community, new legislation and policies. For example, Elsevier just adopted ours this October. We released a new set of policies for editors, authors, and reviewers. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I think for now, if I can just hand this back to Calvin for a little bit more of a deep dive into how researchers are using Gen AI.
Thanks, Danny. Danny, you really set us up for talking a little bit more about how researchers are using Gen AI. Gen AI really has become a lot more popular in the last couple years than it ever has been before. So with the pressure that I think a lot of us are seeing in the research space, a lot of folks are looking to AI to kind of help us with efficiency, to speed things up, right? So over 50% of researchers across the globe are using AI as a way to help themselves save time, right? And a lot of them are coming out of it feeling like, AI is speeding things up for them. Across the globe, I think less than half of us ever feel like we have enough time to do research, writing grants, teaching, supervising students, writing papers. A lot of it is very, very, very time consuming, and it can kind of pull us away from the work that we want to do when it comes to research. The pressure to publish is stronger than it ever has been. And I think that, along with everything else, is pushing a lot of us to look to AI as a way to kind of help us move things along quickly, kind of get things done much more quickly so that we can free up time to do other kind of more time-consuming things. So 84% in the research from Wiley found that, in 2025, 84% of researchers now are using AI tools in some way to kind of help them with their work. That's up from 57% in 2024. So that's a pretty huge jump. Um, In particular, a lot of folks are using and looking to AI to help us with research and publication tasks. So a lot of writing and editing driven tasks, we're looking to AI to help us with that. Um, so current and future uses of AI. So you can take a look at this data here. This is from Elsevier. Um, a lot of researchers now are using AI for a number of key things. So finding and summarizing latest research, using AI as kind of a tool to help us, find relevant research that's kind of peripheral to our work and getting quick, rapid summaries, bullet points of research so that we can kind of go through things much more quickly. So performing literature reviews, helping us write or draft even grant proposals, manuscripts. A lot of folks are relying on AI to help us with that. Um, Slightly less when it comes to analyzing research data, managing, research projects. I think folks are coming out seeing that AI is really not the best tool to help us with aspects that require critical thinking, right? As Danie talked about earlier, generative AI really is more of a pattern recognition tool. It's very good at picking up patterns and trying to give you what it thinks you might be looking for, or that next piece in that sequence. But really, when it comes to things that require a little bit more critical thinking, such as designing experiments or studies or generating research hypotheses, AI really is not at that point where it's able to do a good job. Humans are really much better at evaluating data, critically looking at data to see where those links might be. But in terms of writing and editing, summarizing research findings, doing literature reviews, editing our grants, and writing our manuscripts, AI has become very common. Um, a lot of folks, so you can see over 50% of folks are looking to AI and using AI to help them with aspects of this type of work. And as Danny talked about, that type of work is really only gonna, increase in the next coming years. Folks are looking to AI to do more and more of that type of work um, in the future. But there's also, a bit of a reality check when it comes to using AI, right? So AI, we have to be cautious because it's not, because it really is, very much a pattern recognition type of programming. Inaccuracies and hallucinations will emerge. And that's something that a lot of researchers are grappling with. So over 50% of researchers this year and even in previous years have raised concerns about inaccuracies that come with using AI. So AI generating false citations, providing with you with incorrect information when it comes, especially when it comes to biomedical research, generating just fake data, fake citations, fake conclusions. Um, and also concerns about information security and data privacy, right? Research is at the core, what all of us do. And so we're very concerned about, our work being leaked out to other people, being shared with AI and being used by AI to for training. Um, so there's a lot of concerns about that. And so I'm just showing you an example here on the right where you can ask AI similar or even identical questions. And occasionally it will come up with sometimes contradictory information. Um, so AI really is not a good source of accurate information. And so, as Danny said, when we use AI in our work, we really have to be careful. We really have to be providing that level of human oversight to the work to make sure that the information that we're relying on or that we're using, even when it comes to writing and editing text for our manuscripts or for our grants, that the information that's coming out of the system that we're including in our work is accurate and is reflective of what we actually want to say. So why are we here talking about AI in publishing? I mean, I've kind of alluded to it already. With the rise in AI in research and the way we use AI in publishing and in our grants, there's a lot of opportunities, right? Especially for early career researchers, using AI to kind of accelerate the production of early drafts. For those of us whose, English may not be our first language, relying on AI to help us improve the clarity, the organization, and the overall language and grammar of our writing, right? Helping us learn and practice, writing and editing text. AI can be very useful in that sense. And for those of us who are graduate students, postdocs, when we're encountering, new methodology or new research areas that are adjacent to ours, and we want to kind of very quickly get information, gather data and explanations of methods or concepts. AI can be very powerful in that sense. But again, you want to provide that level of human oversight. You want to make sure that after, taking a look at the summaries that AI produces for you, that it is accurate, right? And so AI in this way can help us reduce a lot of our time that's spent on, administrative writing, editing tasks. But again, there's also a lot of risks and responsibilities that come with using AI. AI can be prone to generating fabricated citations, incorrect facts, right? Um, we talked about the ethical and transparency issues that come with using AI, data privacy issues that come with uploading, unpublished work, unpublished research onto AI. Um, and of course, as early career researchers, something that can happen is just becoming over-reliant on AI, and you're losing some of the skills that you might develop otherwise if you were, not relying on AIs as much for research or for editing or for writing. Um, and as AI is becoming more popular, of course, journals, funding agencies, and publishers, we're constantly developing new policies on how AI can and cannot be used and things to kind of look out for and be careful of, as Danny talked about. So Danny's going to cover a little bit more about sort of the overarching policies that most journals take, including, the Elsevier journals, as well as my own journals. And sort of as researchers and authors, what you kind of need to look out for when it comes to using AI. So just some general kind of tidbits when it comes to using AI in your writing and publishing work. AI can never really be listed as an author, right? We talked about how AI really is, a very powerful, pattern recognition program, and it can give off the sense that it's very human when you use it. But of course, it isn't, right? It cannot take responsibility for our research and for the work that we do. So when you're listed as an author for a manuscript, you are implying that you are responsible for the work that's within that article, right? The accuracy and the consistency of that work. And of course, AI cannot be responsible for any of the work that you do. So again, when you are using AI in your manuscripts, in your writing, in your editing, make sure that you are providing that level of human oversight, right? Making sure that the content that you are including in your manuscript does represent your own authentic and original contributions and your own analyses, interpretations, your data, your insight, right? Ultimately, the core of that work has to come from you. This is going to be a theme that we touch on again and again, but that level of human oversight, right? When you're using AI, of course, it's okay. And as the numbers show, a lot of us are using generative AI and AI assisted technologies to kind of help speed things up, to help improve the readability and the language of our grants and of our manuscripts, right? But again, you always have to kind of apply that technology with human oversight and control, right? It can be prone to generating, information that can feel correct and that can feel authoritative, but might actually be biased. It can be incomplete. It can be inaccurate. The citations that it's telling you that it's pulling data from might not actually be real. So again, you have to make sure you're looking through all of that and ensuring that the content is accurate and is reflective of what you're actually trying to say. And Danny's going to touch on this a lot more in the next couple slides, but transparency is key. Transparency when it comes to how you're using your work is going to be a big part of ensuring that you're using the work ethically and that you don't accidentally get in trouble when it comes to using AI. A lot of us are using AI now. There's really no shame in that, but we want to be transparent when it comes to disclosing how we're using AI and AI assisted technologies when it comes to, using those tools to help us with writing, editing, our manuscripts, and a lot of journals now will require you to provide some kind of disclosure statement if you use some kind of AI tool to improve the clarity in the grammar or the language within your work. So why are journals and publishers so strict when it comes with using AI? A big thing is really our role in protecting the research record, right? As journals and as publishers, a big part of what we do is to oversee the peer review process and to try our best to ensure that the work that is published and that is shared across the globe with other researchers um, is reflective of what was actually done, right? And unfortunately, with the pressures that comes with working in research, and it's not just, all of us here today, it's researchers across the globe, those pressures are high. And so AI is being exploited by, bad actors, by paper mills to produce fake, manipulated manuscripts, figures that really are not real, data that isn't real, to generate fake peer reviews to kind of move things through the peer review system and to get their work published, even if the work doesn't, wasn't actually done or doesn't actually have merit. So this is just a headline from the South China Morning Post that was just earlier this year, how AI is being used by paper mills to mass produce fake academic research. So a big part of journals and publishers' work is to try to protect against that, right? To prevent that type of work from being published and from being released into the scientific record. And then, of course, as researchers and as authors, I know it can kind of be scary when you're kind of submitting your work and trying to get your work out there. When when so much of the research that journals are dealing with is sometimes fraudulent or fake. Um, because you feel like, oh, maybe my work's gonna accidentally get tangled up in this web, right? And that's partly why, Danie and I are here today, because, we know you're doing good work and we want to make sure that the publishing process is easy for you, and that you're not getting caught in these types of things. So yes, publishers are, we're really shifting focus to kind of doing our best to detect where AI may be unethically used to create, fake fraudulent content prior to the work being published, because of course retractions are slow and they're imperfect, right? Of course, we're going to always do our best to try to correct the scientific record to remove content that is, fabricated or that is inaccurate. But unfortunately, some stuff does unfortunately kind of get through that screening, get through that pipeline, and this type of fake work can, waste reviewers' time, it wastes editorial resources, and of course, false research and false results can mislead a lot of us, right? We're relying on the honesty of other researchers and the accuracy of the work that's produced to further our own work. And so when, you know, content gets retracted because turns out, a couple of years later that it was fabricated, it was inaccurate, um, that can derail a lot of our projects, and that's not something we want, right? So yes, I think with time, journals are going to be kind of slowly a little bit more stricter when it comes to screening. You might be encountering more questions. You may be asked to produce more disclosure statements, just again for that transparency aspect. And of course, we never want to assume anyone here is doing anything, unethical. And I don't think anyone here is doing anything unethical, but just being transparent and making sure that you're using AI ethically will ultimately hopefully protect you from getting caught in these systems that are designed to stop fraud, right? We don't want you to get tangled up in this web. And ultimately, of course, with the rise of AI and the type of inaccuracies that can come from using AI, something to keep in mind is even when you're reading articles, to just kind of again keep that critical cap on. Make sure you're thinking about the work critically. Peer review is very essential and it's core to the way we do research, but it's not an infallible system. So again, something published earlier this year in MIT's Technology Review. AI models are unfortunately using a lot of the inaccurate information that's produced by other AI systems. Um, and from retracted papers, and providing that to you as facts. So again, providing that level of human oversight, making sure that the information that you're picking up, that you're highlighting from AI, is accurate and is representative of your research area. So with that, let's pass it over to Danie to talk about policies. Those are really, really, really key.
Actually, if you don't mind, Calvin, can we go back to the slide you were just on? Because I'd like to just add a couple things. Everything Calvin
Yeah, of
said was just
course.
extremely important, and a couple things came up. Um, One is just sort of the rise of things, the rise of how these unethical AI use in manuscripts, for example, is being detected. Um, it is something of an arms race because the Gen AI tools that people are using are evolving at such a rate that the detection tools and the tools to counter them within like a editorial submission system, it's frankly, it's you can't really keep up. As soon as you have one tool, another model has been released, which it used to be quite easy. Even a year or so, I remember giving talks on like things like tortured phrases, where a common phrase in a scientific discipline might have been run through a spin bot, and it comes out and it's kind of funny because it's not the term of art, but you pick it up because it's like, well, that's not what people in my field really say. This is something meant to sort of obfuscate that a human wasn't really at the wheel here. It's meant to evade plagiarism detection, was what spin bots were primarily used for. And I think there's less and less of that these days because the Gen AI models have evolved at a pace where they increasingly look valid. As per Calvin's comment about retractions, I will just say that every year for the last, I think, 3 or 4 years, the number of retractions that have been issued by different publishers has been more than the previous year, and each year is the most ever. So we've got sort of an ecosystem where it's easier to have sleuths in looking through published research and pointing out where images might have been manipulated, and whatever else might have happened, looking through the published research to find fraudulent activity. This all adds a lot onto publishers because retractions are difficult. They need to go through correspondence with the authors. There might need to be an investigate. Well, if you reach the retraction stage, you're most likely going to be interfacing with the university's integrity department, and an investigation will be done. Investigations take time. So all of these things are just a tremendous weight on the publishing system. So what we're trying to do is build more and more early detection in. But like I said, that sort of falls prey to the evolutionary aspect of the Gen AI that I was talking about. And the other thing that Kelvin referenced, the paper mills, I don't know how many of you might be familiar with it, but this is a business model in a lot of parts of the world where everyone globally, all researchers are under this pressure to publish. And so people look for ways to help them. And it's not always that people are looking to cheat. There's just like a need to publish to advance their career. They might not stay in, um, you know, they might not stay in research themselves. They might go into industry, but they need that publication or those publications to graduate. So they turn to these paper mills, which offer a range of services from the legitimate to the absolutely illegitimate to the egregious of selling authorship on papers. Um, so it's a very vibrant system where AI is sort of increasingly being deployed to evade detection by editors who are overstretched, of course, because they are researchers themselves. They are, trying to do what's best for the journal. A paper might look good. Of course, a lot of us want to publish papers from these emerging areas. Like in my work, we want to publish areas from emerging regions where there's been a lot more investment in R&D, and the science has really progressed, and there's increasing researchers in the area. But that can correlate with where unethical activity is coming from too. So it's very difficult to operate in. So I just want to say these are all the sort of factors that are influencing these things. And when all boiling down to when you, as maybe an early career researcher, are using Gen AI and you don't disclose, these are all of the various factors that editors and editorial submission systems are sort of looking for. So just saying, that you used the Gen AI model, what you used it for, and why is just hugely helpful, because we can assume, as Calvin's point, if 84% or whatever it is of us are using it, I think it's safe to assume that some level of Gen AI has been used on an individual manuscript. So please disclose it. It will certainly put you apart from the authors who don't disclose it, and which is more problematic. All right, can you go over to the, yeah, thank
Yes,
you.
of course. We did have, I think, a really great question in the chat.
Mm.
So how are retractions indicated in the metadata so humans and AI tools know how to not use or harvest that data? I think that's a really great question. So I think as humans, it's much easier because when a retraction is issued, it's always linked to that original article, so that if you were to click into that original article, it would indicate to you that it has been retracted. But for AI tools, I think it's less likely the AI tool is going to pick that up. Danie, do you know if
Yeah,
that's
I
the
think
case?
this is the big question between I don't mean to say something like OpenAI that has ChatGPT. I don't mean to say that's irresponsibly developed. I cannot speak to it at all. But what I can tell you is that there are other systems, and I'm sorry because I am from Elsevier, so this is what I know best, but there are other publishers that are doing the same exact thing, which is the closed model. So where you're only training the system on published papers, and excluding retracted papers. So because you've got the retraction notice, it's got its own DOI, so it's not hard to exclude retracted papers from a corpus. Um, but this is a sort of key component of AI that is developed specifically for researchers. So for us, we have Scopus AI and like Science Direct AI. Um, uh, uh, that's the database of all the papers for that's Scopus, and Science Direct is where all the publications are. So there's more trust built into that kind of a system because we know that that's absolutely what we want to avoid, and we know that we don't want to contribute misinformation, and we don't want to add that sort of work down the line for our research integrity retraction panels. So trust is more built into some of these systems, but yes, be careful with ones that are not closed, and that don't fully advertise what are the responsible sort of the responsibilities and ethics that undergird the system that was built. I think look for that sort of transparency from the developers of the AI model.
Yes, I think that does that answer the question? But I mean, exactly what Danny shared. The ones that can feel more accessible, like ChatGPT, are not really built. It's not intended for us to use it as a research tool. So that type of model really is built on, yes, accurate information, but also likely inaccurate and retracted data. So you do have to be very cautious when you use these types of larger. They can feel more accessible, of course, easier to use because of their popularity. But again, they're not intended for us to use it in that way. So again, we have to be very careful when we are using it for research and we are relying on it for accurate data.
I really appreciate it. So just quickly to clarify, Elsevier and CSP, when you discover that a paper, when you retract a paper and its affiliated data set, you withdraw it from your services, from your collection that you provide to your clientele. Is that a true
No,
statement?
no, we don't. There's when you retract a paper, it's not pulled from the scholarly record. The retraction notice is there. The paper is accessible just with a giant watermark over it that says retracted and the reason for retraction. What we do is exclude it from Scopus AI or Science Direct AI so that inaccurate conclusions drawn from a retracted paper are not reflected in summaries and the paper is not referenced.
Yeah. Great.
So it
Thank you.
won't, it won't propose a retracted paper as something you should check out.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think my what I'd like to say about this is more or less a summary. I think it's we've already uh, gone over this fairly deeply. I think that for an author, really the main thing is responsible use, human oversight, know which system you're using. Verify the accuracy, especially of any references that it suggests for your paper, that sort of thing. Um, and make sure it reflects your actual work. Maybe it's wordsmithing, but does this reflect the science that you did and your viewpoint on the science? Um, and of course, check the terms and conditions of this is yeah, as we just said, check the terms and conditions of your AI tools. But I want to get more into if you can advance the slide, Calvin. I don't know if any of you might be serving in any capacity as an editor, but I do expect that some of you might be reviewers. It's very important to know that it's not okay to upload a manuscript into an OpenAI tool like this. And the same goes, this is to protect the author's rights and to keep the manuscript confidential. So, and the same goes not just for the manuscript, but any other documents that may contain information about the paper. That includes the peer review report, any editorial notification letters. We don't allow Gen AI currently to be used by reviewers or editors in the review, evaluation, or the decision-making process of the paper. I think we, probably many other publishers, are actively exploring compliant tools that enable safe and secure use. So this is another policy that might be revised in the future. But right now, I think we're still some distance from that, and from the sort of trustworthiness and integrity of the process. So it is still very much humans at the wheel. We do have a number of AI tools that are going to assist, and this many publishers are going to have AI within the system that is more like the traditional AI that I was talking about at the outset. That's not generating new information; it's just synthesizing things like finding reviewers. Finding reviewers for editors might point you to certain people because they've published on on the same topic recently. It can point to, it can give some additional signals around whether or not they're appropriate to review. But for the actual, synthesizing of a paper and providing a review, that's all humans. If you can go to the next slide. One that's a hot topic and is a little bit harder to, I know that this has come up quite a bit. Elsevier and again a number of other publishers, because there's not a lot of daylight, I think, between the different publishers' Gen AI policies. So I am using an Elsevier slide, but this is safe to say for basically most publishers. But we don't allow the use of Gen AI to create or alter images in submitted manuscripts. And the only exception is where AI is used as part of the research process. So that's in the case of certain research fields like biomedical imaging. And in those cases, of course, we require a full disclosure. The use of Gen AI is not permitted in the production of artwork, but in some cases it might be allowed for journal covers. And anytime there's any question about is this an all right, use of AI for creating artwork or not, do be sure to check the individual journal's guide for authors because those policies will be up to date. And I think that's it from me. I don't know if there's any closing thoughts, but I really appreciated the opportunity to talk with you all. That's my email address there. Feel free to reach out. Thank you, Calvin.
No, thank you, Danie. Yes, yeah, if you have follow-up questions or things that emerge in your own research that you kind of want some insight on, feel free to reach out to us. That's what we're here for. Um, does anyone have any emerging questions or things that they want to discuss since we're all here? I know AI is, like Danie said, it really is a constantly evolving space, right? It's evolving quickly, it's changing quickly the way that I kind of highlighted today, a lot of us are relying on AI for writing and editing support, doing literature reviews, things like that, that seem for us a little bit lower risk. In future years, it's very likely going to change, the way researchers will use AI and even the way that we'll use AI, right, Danie? The way journals and publishers will use AI to aid in their work will very likely continue to evolve and continue to change in future years. Um, and of
Months.
course, then policies and guidelines around that will change as well. So when in doubt, check the journal and the publisher's guidelines. If you're really not sure, reach out and ask. You're better off clarifying it early on than getting yourself into a position where you feel like you may have used it in a way that violates the journal's policy. And you never want to put yourself in a position, right? Even if you're, well-intentioned, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you get tangled up in this type of business where, especially as early career researchers, it can, a retraction or even, you know, um, anything like that could really taint your record, and we don't want to see that happen to anyone here.